Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this edition of the Business of Compliance podcast. Thank you all for joining us. Today, we are so excited to have very special guest, Shreesh Bhattarai, Director of High Trust at Align. Shreesh, thank you so much for joining us.
Patrick, I've been a connoisseur of your information and your podcast from the sideline, and you've had a lot of great guests. And I got to say, it's an honor to be invited on this. So thank you
The
so
honor
much.
is mine. The honor is truly mine, Shreesh. And for the audience, I think you'll understand why as we work through our dialogue today. But that said, Shreesh, you recently released a video really sharing and unpacking your opinion that third-party risk management, TPRM, as we've historically known it, is kind of broken today. Maybe you would care to unpack that a little bit for our listeners and hope that we can edify?
Absolutely. And so that you hit it right on the head off, right from the start, Patrick. And that's basically my thesis is that third party risk management, or we like to call it TPRM, is broken. And in the video, I lay out a few examples of why it's broken, and we can obviously dive into some of those reasons here. But
Yes.
I just didn't want to complain, right? I didn't want to. Obviously, the problem exists, and that's the education is obviously very, very important to demonstrate that there's a long way to go to perfectifying the system. But I also wanted to propose a tangible, what I think is a tangible, scalable, and a verifiable solution. But before we start diagnosing the issue, I wanted to paint a very simple, if I may, a very simple and a relatable picture, right? Think about the first thing that we do when we wake up in the morning. We check our phones. Oh, now Andrew Huberman will tell us, don't do that. Go outside, get your sunlight, wait for 90 minutes before you get your first cup of coffee. Now, I don't know if all of us really, follow his message, but we keep scrolling on the phone. And it's almost a guarantee when we scroll through our phones that we come across another company being hit by a cyber attack, being breached, right? So now 5, 6, 7 years ago, Patrick, that would have been a huge deal, right? I would probably ping you or ping my cybersecurity friends and say, wow, hey, did you see that? Did you see aghast, right? It's just the unbelievable story that would become, the amount of data that was compromised, the amount of ransom now the companies had to pay to restore their services. That would have been a huge deal. But fast forward to 2025 in the current moment that we're in, it's hardly a story. We probably don't even click on that story. We probably move on, we keep scrolling, and then start reading about who our favorite NFL team is going to sign in free agency.
Yes.
These stories have become so common and we're totally desensitized to them. And as someone who's been in this industry, in the cybersecurity space for more than a decade now, that is just hard to watch, right? That is just
Disheartening.
excruciating.
Yes.
Just the apathy, just the normalization, the illusion that, hey, just the cost of doing business. It's just painful to watch from the sideline. So that's why, I wanted to talk a little bit about this topic, provide what's wrong, what's broken, and really provide a solution because the solution exists. It's not like we have a problem and we don't know what we're going to do. The solution does exist. And that's why I want to talk about it. And that was basically the essence of the video.
And Shreesh, what I love about the picture you're painting is it does uncover and maybe pick a scab that most people refuse to look at. And that is our growing sense of apathy toward what's a very, very concerning pattern. Secondarily, that is, that same 5 or 6 years ago, where we would have been shocked that there was a breach, where a certain amount of records were compromised. In that time frame, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in that time frame, immediately our frustration was directed toward the bad actors. Today, in those same scenarios, when frustration is expressed, it's expressed toward the security teams inside the organization itself for not having built better programs and better controls to protect and mitigate against those very same compromises. So it's really interesting how perspective has changed.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, I think the energy, the cognitive energy that we'd spent on, you know, kind of going after the bad actors, I mean, rightfully so. We should have done that.
Yep.
After looking at what we were or not, that's something that we were not doing internally. We were not controlling what we could control, all the while blaming somebody else to have infiltrated our system, right? Now the conversation I feel like is going in the right direction. We've established that, hey, there's a problem that exists, and the problem is something that we can take care of internally. So I think that's a good fresh of change that we've seen over the last few years.
Yeah, and Shreesh, as you think about it, as we do think about this sense that third-party risk management is broken, because I do agree with you. I think it's fundamentally flawed today, the practice. Why is that? I mean, are there certain levers that people are pulling today that maybe are anachronisms or inappropriate for today's world?
Yeah. So obviously there are a plethora of reasons that I could, we could be talking about this all day, and I could enumerate multiple reasons why TPRM is broken. But just for the sake of time, let me give you three of them, which
Please,
I think are extremely important, right?
please.
So the first one, I feel like it's the process is extremely manual and messy. The process as it exists today, we're still talking about spreadsheets, PDFs, Zoom calls, emails. I mean, that's our TPRM, right? And that's just a rinse and repeat. That's just in a loop. So people are sending SIG questionnaires, often without really understanding the vendor's risk profile or business context.
Yes.
I don't even know where they create those questionnaires. They probably just go on Google and they just export something and they say, hey, go fill this out, right?
Pull down the SIG-Lite standard template, and this is what we need. Yeah.
What we need. The questionnaires are obviously inconsistent, right? They're so subjective
Hmm.
and it's impossible to scale that way. And if you're a vendor, you're getting this questionnaire from the organization you hope to work with, then you're probably going to make up some of the answers. You know that some of the questions that they're asking does not relate to your scope, to your environment. But just from a procurement standpoint, you're going to make up the answer and send it back to them,
Yes.
right? Now, multiply this process for like 50 vendors, 100 vendors, 200 vendors, 400 vendors. It becomes this unimaginable, game that we play. And yet we keep pretending that this is risk management just because it provides this illusion of security. We're doing a lot of things. We're getting a lot of these questionnaires. We're filling those out. We're busy. So it creates this illusion that, wow, I mean, just because we're working so much, we are putting so much time and effort to this. But in reality, it's not working, right? It's the risk theater. That's what's happening. And, let me kind of give you a specific example. SOC 2 reports, for example. Vendors know that they need a SOC 2 to win deals. So what do? Right? They go out and get one as fast and cheap as possible, usually for like $5,000, say. And then the result, that SOC 2 report is so thin, so templated, right? That you can't rely on it, but also you can't reject it without slowing down procurement. So what do the TPRM teams do? They either let it slide or they spin up more due diligence, right? Interviews and checklists and follow up. I mean, work that shouldn't be necessary if the original report was actually credible,
Was thorough. Yes.
right?
Yes.
And guess what, right? The vendor never really hears why the report was a problem because nobody's giving them the feedback, right? There is no feedback, there is no accountability. And so there is no reason to improve. So the cycle continues. Bad audits, no trust, and then more manual work. I mean, that's a true definition of broken.
So, Shreesh, the third party risk, hearing you describe this, so what I get a sense of is TPRM today isn't as much about controlling risk as it is giving it more ground to grow. It almost feels like we've created an environment that promotes risk rather than mitigates it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just in this loop. We just keep doing this and doing this and doing this again, all the while knowing that this is not working. right? And so the second one, right, going back to my I was gonna give you 3. That was the first one. The second one, there's no common language, Patrick, right? There's no shared language in this.
And this
A
is huge.
client asks for a SOC 2, you get a type 1, which is obviously just looking at the design of the controls and not the operating effectiveness over a period of time, right? Or they'll send you a ISO cert with absolutely no context.
Just a
Or
certificate.
maybe
Yep.
just certificate, right? Or maybe you ask for a risk assessment and they'll send you one from 2 years ago. You know, everybody thinks that they're doing security, right? The quote unquote security, but they're just speaking in different dialects.
Yes.
And that misalignment, it leads to confusion, it leads to delays, and frankly, like a huge opportunity cost for the business, right? And then again, like I've said before, it creates this illusion of security. You think you're covered, right? But in reality, you're just in the dark. It's just not working.
Yes.
So that's the other issue. And then finally, I think this is the most important one of them all, in my opinion, is that the growth just outpaces security all the time, right? We are extremely rushed. If you look at, a life cycle of a startup company, right, an up and coming company, how does that work? You bootstrap your way up, you find the product market fit, and then hopefully you can start raising some funds, right? You get into from private equity or venture capital, pre-seed, seed round, series A, series B. Now, that's all well and good for your business, but your security and your compliance within the company is kind of thrown on the wayside, right? Because
Yes.
in this span of time while you're growing, that's your ultimate focus, is to grow, grow, grow. Hey, how's my revenue? How am I going to grow my revenue?
Right.
How am I going to grow my margins? What's my EBITDA multiple looking like, right? So because I really got to show that I'm lean if I want to be transacted again, maybe in the next few months.
Yes.
All these questions that you are so focused on, that compliance kind of gets thrown out the window. And as you grow, as you're in that growth mindset, I'll argue that security is even more important, because if you're growing at that pace, just think about it, right? If you're growing at that pace, the systems of your company are, in theory, are probably holding more data, right? Transmitting more data, processing more data. So
Hmm.
in an event of a breach, you are exposing a lot more PHI and PII and sensitive information than you did when you were a smaller company. So it actually requires even more vigilance to your security as you grow. So then what happens is you're in this growth, 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 right? All gas, no brakes. You're also onboarding vendors like crazy, right?
Yes. Well,
With more,
you
you have
have, yes,
you have to. You're not gonna bring every function of the business in house. You're gonna
not
start
smart,
outsourcing a lot of those.
not smart.
So you just have no time to vet them properly, right? Because there's no time or structure to vet them in a concise manner. And so that's when you see, rubber stamp questionnaires and outdated reports, and then almost hope kind of becomes the strategy, right? I mean, and then, going back to SOC 2,
Yes.
is the strategy when you accept like a low quality report because it has a CPA firm letterhead on it, right?
Yes.
This is not sustainable, right? And it is absolutely not real security.
And along with hope being a strategy, I think a lot of organizations, a lot of procurement officials, whether they can state it or not, feel in the back of their mind, well, if there is a problem, accountability will just be on the vendor. We won't suffer because they have fallen down or they have failed in some way, shape, or form. And what I think every organization needs to hear, needs to really own, is that is just never the case. Regardless of the driver, regardless of the relationship that caused your organization to, in your scenario, Shreesh, have some sort of breach of sensitive information, you as an organization are always accountable. Your accountability cannot be transferred. In some instances, you can transfer limited risk through insurance, but you'll never transfer accountability. It just doesn't work.
It doesn't work like that. Yeah. I mean, and going back to my strolling example, it's not the name of the vendor that you see trending for all the wrong reasons,
Yes.
right? It's your name. You could care less why you got to the situation you got to. Your name is going to be on there, not your vendors. Nobody's going to care about that. But it's your fiduciary duty to ensure that the vendors that you work with are being accounted for, right? Are being looked at with the vigilance that you hold yourselves accountable to. That's the point.
I mean, the thing is, to your point, so you're laying out this scenario we're in. I, as a company, have started small, really believe in what I'm doing, and suddenly I start to grow. And so then there's this reinforcing loop, this positive reinforcement, this virtuous cycle we're in. Because I'm growing, I grow more. Because I grow more, I'm growing even faster. And so all the while, we kind of focus on those growth initiatives, those growth activities over the short term, as opposed to ensuring that we have a long term repeatable structure to protect ourselves as an organization. Kind of in that vein, what on earth are companies supposed to do? I mean, we know we got problems, but what do we do about it?
Yeah. Yeah. And we can get into the solution, obviously, but to tag onto that one point, Patrick, I don't think that this is a mutually exclusive problem. I think we can chew and walk at the same time, right? You can grow as a business, but the security can still be a main factor during your growth, right? I don't think just because you're growing in an exponential manner means that security needs to take a backseat. I don't think it works like that. Because if you look at the organizations that are truly mature in their security, they've put a lot of resource in that security because they understand the long game. They understand the ramifications of being in a breach. So from day one, they're investing to say that, hey, I don't want to be trending on the social platforms here. And what is that going to do to my reputation? And what is that going to do to a few $100 that I save now, that I think that I save now?
Right.
What am I going to have to pay from a liability from all the lawsuits that are coming my way? So the smart people always do that analysis.
Yes.
So I think you can do both at the same time.
What I love about what you're describing here for those business listeners, Shreesh is describing the real business risk that you're assuming by choosing to run this program poorly. It's not the technical risk, which is always going to be a part of it. It's also the business risk. What are we prepared to risk in order to make a short term decision today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about the solution,
Let's
right?
do it.
So
Yeah.
the bad news is that we said there is a problem. There's a huge problem that exists, and luckily there's a lot of education now. A lot of people know what the problem is. But the good news then is there's actually a solution. There is a better way, Patrick.
Tell her.
And so we obviously need a system it's standardized, right? So that everybody is speaking the same language.
Yes.
It's verifiable. So you're not just trusting an Excel file or an email thread or a PDF document that who knows how it was created. And then a system that is scalable so that you're not drowned in 1,000 PDFs, right? Your desktop doesn't look like a graveyard of PDFs. So it works with 50 vendors and it works with hundreds of vendors.
Yes.
And that's where this thing called high trust comes in. Okay. So what is high trust? Let's talk a little bit about that. High trust is a risk and a risk management and a privacy framework that has been around since 2007. Yes, it started in healthcare. uh, You know, it has evolved into an industry agnostic framework that's out, right? But the beauty of the framework is that it has become more than just a certification. It has become this ecosystem where in which, right, it offers this tiered, right size level of assurance. Let's break it down. They have three different product types, E, I, and R. So these are three assessment types. The first one, E1, is a foundational type of assessment, geared toward low risk vendors. They're pretty quick, they're efficient, obviously a low cost. Then you have an I1 assessment, which is for moderate risk. It's tested and it's credible. And then the R2, which is the gold standard of a framework, right? That's been incepted since the inceptance of high trust back in '07.
Very
And
beginning.
these are for high risk regulated environments. It's extremely deep and rigorous. Everybody aspires to get there. But high trust realized over the last 5 to 6 years that not every single company needs to go directly get an R2 assessment, right? It's really cumbersome, not only from a cost standpoint, but also from a scope standpoint, right? Not every company that's out there fall in the same risk profile category at all. Some have risk because they don't have a lot of PII and PHI in their system, in their environments, and some do. And so it's this malleable way of moving from jumping from one to the next. You can start as a company, you can start out with an E1 assessment, right? And as your risk profile changes, then you can move up. You can matriculate up to an I1 and then all the way to the R2, depending on where you are in the risk landscape. So those are the three assessment types. And the beauty of this ecosystem and the framework is that it is independently validated. The way that high trust assessments work is you need an accredited assessor. So, as an organization, I would go out, I would hire an accredited high trust assessor firm like Align,
Okay.
and perform my assessment, right? So, Align would go in, perform that assessment, and once it's complete, we would provide that package, that testing package, to the governing body, High Trust. And High Trust would subsequently perform another round of quality assurance before issuing the final report, the draft report and the final report. So let's just pause, right? Think about the credibility, that report that you're going to get
Yes.
from going through the High Trust certification, and put that on a side by side with a questionnaire, right? With a checklist, or even an attestation report that your cousin probably gave you. I mean, just it's
Created in PowerPoint.
not an apples to apples comparison.
And
And
Shreesh is
business, what would I trust?
yeah, as you're saying this, and trust, I think trust is a huge, huge thing. As you're saying this, you mentioned the internal questionnaire. And so somebody in the org fills this out as best they can, they send it over. So I think that carries with it some level of assurance, very, very low level, but some level of assurance. As you describe the high trust process, what you're saying is first, an independent third party will evaluate what's happening and then make recommendations or submit evidence to high trust, who becomes a second layer of external independent validation for that organization that what they're doing actually is appropriate and in conformity to some known good standard around protecting sensitive information. That's what feels like what high trust is providing in this instance with the relationship with organizations like Align is even more assurance for the market that what a customer says is in place to protect sensitive information is not only in place, but also effective.
Absolutely. And so when you get that high trust certification, right? Somebody asks you for the certification, you hand them one, right? That you've just gone through. It tells that reader that, hey, don't just trust me with blind faith, right? Trust me because I've been through this ringer. I've been through this fire, and my controls, my very prescriptive controls, because high trust is very prescriptive and comprehensive in nature, that I've been through all of this, and it has not only been validated by an accredited high trust assessor firm, an independent party, but also been looked at very, very rigorously by high trust itself.
Yes.
So it's, it's when there's so much weight in that latter report because, what happens, Patrick, as you know, in this industry is that when you get a SOC 2 report, an attestation report, you almost have to look at the badge of the CPA firm. Not all SOC 2s are created equal.
They're just not. No,
They're not.
yeah,
And so with this, we eradicate that problem. It helps you streamline that TPRM process, right? And unlike other frameworks, Hydrus actually knows whether its models works, right? Let me kind of give you one data point here. In 2024, so Hydrus releases this trust report every single year where they go and look at all the organizations that went through high trust certification. And in 2024, 99.41% of high trust certified environments did not report a security breach,
To
right?
almost all of them.
Almost all of them. I mean, let that sink in, right? That's almost impossible. And that's not a marketing claim. I mean, that's a verified performance data.
Yes. Shreesh, what I love about this, and for our listeners, I think the take home is you will be tested. That just is what this game is when you have resources that are exposed that have some external footprint. You will be tested. And so the question to answer is, do I want to be tested by bad actors, or do I want to be tested by independent third parties who have my best interest at heart? And what really is the decision that you as a leader in your organization get to make, because no matter which path you choose, the bad actors are still going to test you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, are you going to cut corners and really look at the really as a CEO or a CISO that's running this program within your company? I mean, how far stretched is your vision, right? Is it a short term vision? Am I just trying to win that next deal and not let my competitor win that? Or am I in this game for the long haul, right? Am I really thinking about security? Because the ROI is going to come.
Hmm.
It's definitely going to come. Because if you start cutting some corners and then, yeah, you may win the next two deals and then something goes awry, forget about the long term problem. I mean, you probably don't even need to have one because you may be out of business by that point, right?
Yes.
So it's this assessment that one has to perform very, very diligently before putting trust on hope and putting trust on reports that just lack extreme credibility.
Yes. Yes. So, Shreesh, as an organization that is looking to outsource certain services, so I'll engage with a vendor. That vendor says to me, "Well, I currently have high trust certification. What does next step look like for me as an organization? What do I need to consider as I validate the documentation that the vendor sends me? How can I actually make use of this knowledge,
Yeah.
this learning?" Yeah.
So we're trying to get the vendors. So that's the whole point of this conversation, right? Is that we're hoping that the vendors go through or been mandated by the organization to at least go through a E1 certification or I2, depending on the risk profile that they fall under. And once they do that, right now you're saying, okay, what is then, all right, now my vendor has gone through that certification. What is my next course of action?
What do I do with it?
Well, it's almost the answer to that is fascinating because it's not like you're getting a questionnaire back and you're trying to verify, hey, does this question make sense? Did they answer this the right way? You know, with the fact that you already know the controls that they've been tested on, you already know the scores that they've obtained as part of the E1, I1, or the R2 certification. So there is actually minimal work that you have to do because the results that have been, earned through going through this independent, rigorous assessment through a line or and then subsequently validated by high trust, it gives you that level of confidence that wow, they have been through the fire. All these controls that they've tested, I can rely on that as opposed to something that's just been handed out without any independent verification or assurance.
Understood. It's so comparable to hiring new college graduates. As much as we don't like to admit it, the university name on the diploma has a significant influence over our perceptions of how prepared this graduate will be to be effective. Similar situation?
Absolutely. I mean, just to use the same analogy, right? I think the status quo approach that exists now, Patrick, we're letting vendors grade their own homework. With high trust is this credible teacher that is actually going to mark the assessment that you took in a very objective and a fair manner, right? We can't start just grading our own exams. At some point, some independent party needs to come in and tell you, right? Hey, this is not just a participation trophy here. Your process is actually good or bad. Which one is it?
Yes.
We cannot make that decision for ourselves.
And Shreesh, it's okay if you can't answer this, but I am compelled to. Most of our listeners are very familiar with the fact that I love ISO management systems and I love to promote use of ISO management systems. We're applicable, we're appropriate. If memory serves, it feels like at least at some point in High Trust's origin, there was a connection to some of the ISO management systems. Is that fair? Is that still a way to think about the structure that will need to be employed for organizations to be successful with their High Trust certification?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll answer that before I have to do this, right? I have to give you your flowers because like I said at the outset of this podcast, I've been a connoisseur of all the information, and you've been a very fresh voice when it comes to AI, when it comes to ISO. So
Thank
I
you.
follow a lot of your material, all the people that you've had on your podcast, and I have learned a lot. So I have to give you kudos. Keep doing what you're doing, my friend. And that's, I think the community, the compliance security community really appreciates that.
Thank you.
On the ISO front, yes, I trust when it was incepted back in 2007, it wasn't just this, all right, let's just go out and create this new framework, right? Just because we want to do so. The beauty of high trust is that the framework is encapsulated, right? It is integrated from all the existing frameworks, which includes ISO 27001, right?
Interesting.
Includes NIST 853. So it has all these little flavors of ISO and NIST and other frameworks and it puts all of that, right? That's the basic, that's the foundation. And then Hydrus obviously has its own flavor. And that was the idea back when people came to start this framework is that hey, there's a lot of frameworks that are out there, but I don't think we have one that is as comprehensive, that is as scalable, that is as prescriptive as the other ones. And so let's not break what's already there. Let's just use what's already working, and let's just make this even more scalable and comprehensive framework
Love
that
that.
not only organizations within the healthcare space can utilize, but across industries, right? And we're seeing that. We're seeing companies that are not in the healthcare space at all, right? In the tech, in the manufacturing, they are utilizing the Hydrus framework to enhance their security posture. And there's also the ROI component, right? Whenever people ask me, Shreesh, why would I want to do high trust? And I always, just for simplicity, I break it down into two different pillars. There's a security pillar, right? Where you obviously want to do this because everything that I've said about the framework, right? It's as prescriptive, it's as comprehensive as it's going to get. It's really going to enhance your security posture for, even if you're starting out, there's the E1 for you, or you're taking it all the way up the chain with the R2. You're going to go to bed at night thinking that, hey, you've done everything that you can to holistically enhance your environments. But then there's also the ROI pillar. A lot of companies are being backed by private equity and venture capitalist firms.
Huge. So
What do they
true.
want to see, right? They want to see a return on their investment. And some of these audits are not cheap, right? They up and that's a huge cost of business every year, but there is ROI to them. There are tangible ROIs off going through this kind of a certification. So it's a win-win situation. Security check, ROI check as well.
Which is huge, which is absolutely huge. As I do think about the potential for return on investment, I think about maturity, Shreesh, right or wrong. We've seen this for a lot of years. We're in organizations seem to do something, seem to produce value for the market really well. But as we start digging in from our perspectives, whether it's ISO, PCI, SOC 2, high trust, or whatever the case may be, we get to see from a little different perspective just how inefficient the remainder of the organization is. And it's almost like some companies are successful in spite of themselves. And I don't say that to be judgmental in any way, it's just the reality of how some organizations work. What I see, however, on the flip side of that is organizations that do choose to implement these management systems or structured frameworks like the high trust CSF, those organizations tend to operate more efficiently and more effectively, and everything else kind of takes care of itself. And so it's almost like that's a keystone habit of ensuring that we do have good operational practices in place that bring benefit everywhere else inside the organization. I mean, I don't know if you see that as well.
Well, we see that all the time. And the beauty of the high trust framework, Patrick, you bring up efficiency. There's a immense efficiency that exists between the high trust CSF and all the other audits that we talked about, right? There's a lot of synergy that can be gained because I understand, as a company, you're probably a 5-person company. You're growing so fast. You just don't have bandwidth to do audits all year round.
Right.
So you are going to crave for synergy. You are going to, hey, how can I mean, somebody's asking me for a SOC 2, but they're also asking me for an ISO. They're also asking me for a high trust. How can I pull this off? Right? I cannot be in this audit cycle, not, 10 months out of the year. It's just not possible. I have a day job to do here. So the mappings, the synergy, the ability to leverage evidences from one framework to the other. Luckily, high trust has that because of how integrated it is to other frameworks that I outlined earlier, that you can do multiple audits. We have clients here at Align, they do SOC 2s and an E1 and an ISO 27001 at the same time because they can, if you align the timeline, you can basically utilize, now it's not 100% match. I mean, it's not a false pretense here, but there is a more than materially impactful synergy that exists between those three frameworks that you can engage in those three audits at the same time.
It's almost like there's a harmony in the coherence between each of
The
those frameworks.
harmonization, yeah,
Yeah.
of all frameworks, 100%.
Incredible. Incredible. Shreesh, so you've educated us a lot. We've kind of laid out this problem of third party risk management. We've talked about some of the reasons why. We've talked about some of the potential solutions and how those solutions are bringing more than just security, they're bringing value. Man, what haven't we talked about? You're a business leader, you're running a company. In today's market, we've got significant pressure, not just from the market, but also from regulatory bodies. I mean, what is it you want leaders to know so that they can make the most informed decisions about how to set their strategy moving forward?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Mm, I think, I think just this, right? I mean, we've already established TPRM is broken,
Yes,
and the problem is not awareness, Patrick. I don't think it's awareness because I think there's in this community it exists. I talk to a lot of people that sit on their boards. Talk to a lot of CISOs and CEOs of the companies that we audit, and through those conversations, it's not the education. It's education's there. Everybody knows it's broken, right? Like I mean, the problem is so ubiquitous that it'll be hard. You have to live in a rock to identify that it's not a problem. I think it's the action, right? We've been stuck in this loop of checklists and spreadsheets and hope for a long, long time, but we got to get out of it because the tools do exist, right? The frameworks do exist. And what's missing now is this will to modernize,
interesting.
right? High trust is going to give you that credible, scalable, verifiable based approach to vendor risk and trusted assurance. And if you're frustrated with vendors submitting a untrustable artifact, I mean, here's the truth, right? The TPRM team is holding the steering wheel. They have the power. And you also have the power to say, hey, this isn't good enough. What you're providing us, this is not good enough. We
Good
expect
enough.
more. We expect more from us and we expect more from you if you want to do business with us. And yes, you may lose some deals at the outset, but that education is going to resonate over time. People are gone, people can only take so many breaches and so many data, compromisation. The rooster has to come home, right? Like it has to come home to roost. And if you do say that clearly and consistently, that message, vendors will have to adjust, right? Because I mean, that I think that's how we shift the market. I go back to my first day as a young cybersecurity professional at the Big Four. Obviously a long time back, and I vividly remember my senior manager kind of walked into our conference room the first day, and she said, "Look, you guys are auditors now, right? We don't trust anything at face value, not even from your mom, right? Everything has to be verified and backed by hard evidence." And that's the foundation often effective security posture, right?
Personal skepticism. Yes. Yeah.
And so if we're not even willing to follow compliance 101 or security 101, if you will, if we're not accepting weak, if we're still accepting weak reports because it's easier when we know what the consequences are that we've outlined in this talk, then we're not honoring the professional, proverbial oath that we took when we entered to do this kind of a job, right? We have
Yes.
to be better. We have to hold our vendors accountable. We have to hold ourselves accountable. And we have to realize that, hey, this is not a problem that's going to go away anytime soon. So it's on us to react quickly and integrate these tools into our compliance and security program.
And to our listeners, please know there is no intervener to shift these burdens to. To Shreesh's point, this is your obligation and will always remain your accountability. So my ask is the same as Shreesh, and that's take action now. We know that there are lots of different directions to go. We also know that it doesn't matter which direction you choose if you don't take the first steps. So my ask would be, again, to Shreesh's point, take action now. We all recognize that things are broken. Let's fix it. And Shreesh, I hate to volunteer you, but for those listeners, those viewers that do have additional questions, would it be okay if they follow up with you just to clarify?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm always available. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can email me. I'm sure my emails are we can probably post it in the notes and yeah, happy to answer. Happy to engage in anything related to this topic. I'm pretty passionate, as you probably could tell. So
Yes. A man of passion who also loves NFL football. For those
I
listeners that
do.
didn't say, that'll be the next one. Yes. The Business of Compliance NFL edition. Uh,
Absolutely.
Shreesh Bhattarai, thank you so much. I am so grateful for not just your expertise, but your friendship. Glad you could make it
And
today. Yeah.
yep. It's mutual, Patrick. Thanks for having me on and hopefully people find this useful.
To our listeners, we'll see you next time. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you.